allow me to introduce myself so we are not complete strangers. My name is Dallas Knight. I'm the Vice President of Client Success and Channel here at Blue Light. I'm also a combat veteran and have an extensive background as an intelligence analyst in the law enforcement realm. So who is Blue Light? If you are unfamiliar, I can summarize my organization up in about 3 words, and that is experience, being that the majority of the staff is prior military, law enforcement, analyst, or a combination thereof. We are cleared. We work a lot in the federal space, and the majority of us have top secret clearances. And we are innovative, which brings me to the next question. What is Blue Fusion? Blue Fusion is our patented technology. We saw a huge challenge in the space industry-wide, and it was born. And it was born to be efficient and adaptable and very flexible. And you'll come to understand and learn exactly what that means when I dive into our demonstration. So this last session of the day is in regards to intelligence supported investigations, primarily within the financial institutions. And our agenda, we're going to cover trends and challenges in the finance vector. I brought on a subject matter expert, as I mentioned, to discuss these things with you guys. I've definitely have had my share of working on financial investigations that were stemmed from primarily narcotic derived organizations, but there's a whole nother realm out there that we're going to chat about. And then I'm going to go over the solution that we provide from Blue Light here from an architectural perspective, as well as demonstrate live to you guys. And then, of course, we'll end with Q&A. Just a couple logistics. There are 2 ways you can communicate with me today, through our Q&A section within the Zoom. So go ahead and post any questions that you have there. We will absolutely get to them by the end of the session. And we also have our chat enabled, so feel free to drop any feedback, comments in there, and our team will also be communicating some information towards the end of the presentation in the chat, so be on the lookout for that. So without further ado, it is my absolute privilege and pleasure to introduce my friend here, Melissa Murphy. She's a consultant, analyst, and innovator, and I know that's vague. That's because she's worked in that type of space. So I'll allow her to elaborate as much as she deems necessary. But Melissa, I have made you co-host, and if you wanted to share your screen, or if you're just going to chat via video, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Great. Yeah, you get me via video today. So if my video cuts out, just let me know. But thank you for that introduction, Dallas. So I am Melissa Murphy, and I'll give you a little bit more color on kind of why Dallas invited me to talk to you and why I'm really excited about being able to engage with Blue Light. So I spent 10 years in banking, where I was the head of regulatory affairs for technology for, several both domestic and foreign tier 1 and tier 2 institutions. And what that meant was I represented all technology inclusive of AML to US regulators, right? I ended up going to graduate school about 2 years ago, where I went to MIT, and I was a Sloan Fellow, where I focused on technology vulnerabilities and specifically financial legislation for policy and national security. So that kind of landed me in a new realm. And what I think is the most exciting about some of the software that I've gotten to do and work on, post-graduate school, is I feel like at financial institutions, everyone's used to hearing, we want to do AML, but we don't really want to stop all of our transactions, right? The goal of the bank is to process transactions. That's how they make money. But I think it's so much more fun working on investigations, because the entire goal is to literally track down as much as you can, right? So I'll kind of lead in there. There's a big arbitrage point between the either system vulnerabilities or reporting, deficiencies of financial institutions, and where those things are picked up by financial intelligence, right? For many different reasons. On the bank side, they have cascading liability. Whenever they open up those kinds of books, it creates hurdles and bottlenecks as far as their processing if they don't want to do it. And it disaligns with their incentives, right? They're there to make money, not to investigate financial fraud, right? That's the job of the partners of Blue Light and Co. to investigate financial fraud or various crimes, right? So how do we close that gap? Now, if you don't kind of stay up on some of the different trends, there's an annual report that started coming out in 2015 that I really like. It's put out by the Financial Action Task Force. They have OECD, Treasury, FinCEN, as well as the Fed Board of Governors and the FBI in there. And it's the National Money Laundering Risk Assessment. So this year's report really highlighted a few different things that I thought would be relevant to this discussion. One of them is that the key weaknesses they identified for anti-money laundering as well as counter-financing terrorism includes a lack of timely access to the beneficial ownership information for legal entities, right? That combined with a deliberate misuse of legal entities and arrangements makes it really, really hard to start investigating financial crime, right? Not only do they have, lack of timely access, but I'm sure everyone here who does investigations knows you spend an incredible amount of time trying to dig through and find who's the beneficial owner behind that legal entity and who's actually sitting behind different webs, right? But this is really important. And I think a multitude of different spaces, not just leading into financial institutions, but I've seen this inside of the DoD, right? When they're doing contractor checks and standard due diligence and enhanced due diligence, where it ultimately ends up getting put on the brunt of financial institutions to identify these things for a multitude of risks, right? What I think is important with some of the things that we look at and how to solve that is that when we know how to ask the right questions of financial institutions and we know how to get to the answers more quickly, I think we can really start to close that gap on the time that you have to consume to get to a point of analysis, right? And how do we do that? We have to do that by understanding what financial institutions are using as far as their language, as well as what data they're collecting, right? They may not go to the second or third level of, covering the beneficial owner, but they probably will have access to either an IP address or other types of login information in part of their cybersecurity realm. So I think that's where we can really start to pull together different aspects of cybersecurity reporting inside of financial institutions, as well as transactions and onboarding, right? And then I'll also kind of highlight some of the things that I thought were most interesting that FinCEN and I think it was the Financial Intelligence Unit at the Fed called out for their special focus areas for 2022, right? One of them being that fraud has an inadequate identity management controls. And the second one was synthetic identity fraud. Now, if you're not familiar with this, this is actually the fastest growing financial crime in the United States, according to joint reporting from the Fed as well as the FBI. And this is the use of either malware, malicious ads, phishing emails, anything to start getting PII, where they can then kind of spoof your identity and facilitate financial fraud after kind of getting you to give up various information. Why I think this is relevant is not only is it the fastest growing financial crime, but this becomes especially more important when we look at what Lau Brainard and the Boston Fed is doing with CBDC, right? As we know in banking, when there's a debit transaction on your bank account, you own the liability versus with credit, right, where the financial institution owns the liability of replenishing those funds. So I think that as we move to the digital currency space, as we move to more of those instantaneous payments, right, and moving away from some of the ACH clearing, I think the ability to really nail down identity, whether that's the identity of who's completing the transaction, standard due diligence, enhanced due diligence, or even inside of financial investigations, becomes incredibly more paramount. And I think that the more we can leverage kind of the layering of technology and the connectivity of different data points, we'll be able to improve, the time that we have access and deal with the abundance of data that's there, right? As I've seen in my years in banking, I think where I saw financial investigations really get hung up is when they stuck to that AML kind of rule book, right? We know what's captured for SARS, we know what's coming out of the due diligence reports, and we really just kind of hamper in on the information that's supposed to be there and whether or not that's valid. But I think that can create more hurdles than really necessary. I think that when we broaden our scope and start to look at, okay, what is, being reported as far as their login? Are they leveraging mobile banking? Can we get an IP address? Can we tie that IP address to an exact location or to a true identity? I think that will drastically cut down on the amount of time. And I think that that's where I'm most excited to see innovation in that space, especially with things like Blue Fusion. So let me pause there because I know I dumped a lot of information and I had 5 to 10 to 15 minutes to talk. So let me see if there are any questions.
I don't see any just yet, Melissa, but guys, don't be shy. You can throw that in there. Unfortunately, I've muted all of you, so you have to type it out.
And then Dallas, I can keep talking about some of the things that I think are interesting with CBDC if you would like, or
yeah, I'd love to hear it. You're a wealth of knowledge, so anything you're willing to deliver, I'm willing to absorb.
Awesome. So on the digital currency space, right? I'm sure everyone saw in the markets this week, there was the FTX exchange, which is going down as the crypto version of Bernie Madoff, who mysteriously filed for bankruptcy and then unfortunately was hacked, where all of his wealth was stolen about a day before the fund shut down, right? So I'm sure Gary Gensler over at the SEC is going to be really, excited to see who he was actually hacked by and how we can figure that out, right? That's another area where I think this becomes important. So if you didn't follow what had happened, right? FTX, which is a cryptocurrency exchange, and is also the CEO is a MIT alumnus, but 99.99% of MIT alumnus do not commit wholesale fraud for securities. So I'm just going to throw that out there. But unfortunately, he did. His firm was worth. Yes, Sam Bankfield definitely needs to go to jail, and I think he will, provided that Mr. Gensler can get his hands on what is required to show securities fraud, right? So when that hack occurred, I think that was the part to me where I was like, really, like at the 11th hour, you were just mysteriously hacked by some unknown person and they stole the remaining amount of funds that were left at your now bankrupt and defunct exchange entity, right? So I think that that's an area that would be interesting to see, where can we start leveraging, the things that are occurring on at the FBI with IC3 and DC3, cyber crimes and internet crimes, as well as the work that's getting done at financial institutions, because there are many people, right? I think there was a couple $1 billion that was given back to the victims of Bernie Madoff. And I'm sure that, SBF and his, now defunct exchange is not going to be any different, right? That's on the crypto side. Personally, I'm a little, anti-crypto. I think it hurts the USD a bit, but I'm very, very long and very supportive of, central bank digital currencies, as well as kind of, USDT, USD Tether, things that move us into the digital space. So it can be monopoly money. Regulation should happen. So Gary Gensler, who's obviously now the chairman of the SEC, was the crypto professor at MIT when I was there, who worked very closely with Simon Johnson, who's one of the top economists in the world, and really focuses on kind of the macro lens. So Simon was the chief economist for the IMF during 2008. He was also one of President Biden's top economic advisors, and still is. He now sits on the board of Fannie Mae, right? And what was interesting about the way that they handled CBDC specifically is that there was a joint initiative between MIT, Harvard Law for Finance, and the Boston Fed to start rolling out these privacy regulations and start focusing on how to get CBDC into the actual marketplace. And I think that while it still sounds a little obscure and people can frequently confuse it with cryptocurrency, I think it's important to remember that just 4 years ago, the FDIC reported that 25% of Americans were unbanked or underbanked, right? And why that's relevant for financial crimes is that means that there's 25% of the US economy that's either operating in cash or moving around money that's never hitting a financial institution, right? This becomes big for our counterfeit bills, our drug trafficking, our human trafficking, human crimes, anything that's predominantly cash business. It creates this, the shadow banking network is what it's called, where the financial regulations don't hit. Now, while Mr. Gensler is getting a lot of heat right now for his lack of regulation on crypto, I think that if you haven't read it, definitely go out and read it. Professor Howell Jackson out of Harvard Law with Professor Timothy Masad, who used to be, Department of Treasury, put out all of their policy recommendations for CBDC, dialing down to, stopping financial fraud, to identity protection in different ways. They want to kind of layer where the vulnerability sits for the people on privacy, but also on how to stop bank runs and where is the vulnerability when markets come and congest and contract, right? So if you haven't read that, definitely check that out. That's a really interesting piece. But let me pause there because I can talk about this all day, but I want to open that chat. Interesting landscape to see develop if CBDCs will take more market share and ultimately eradicate fiat in the years to come. I do think it's interesting on fiat currency. So there's two professors out of MIT and Harvard that I really like. The first one out of MIT is Athanasios Orphanides. He's the god of central banking. So he's the one that helped design quantitative easing during 2008. And then Howell Jackson, who I was lucky enough to get to study under for the full year. And he writes a book, I think what's it called? It's on my bookshelf, Financial Regulation, Law and Policy. And he actually goes through the whole history of fiat money and then dives in specifically to challenges with AML and whether or not, CBDC will wipe out fiat currency in the near future. Personally, and this is just my 2 cents, I don't think fiat will be wiped out until we can acknowledge our issues with quantitative easing and counterfeit currency, right? There's a lot that gets tied into the monetary supply and the way that we actually support the fiscal economy outside of just what we look at from, kind of the day-to-day economy. And I think that that's going to pose a big challenge, right? I think it hurts us as far as inflation control, but I also think it is going to really kind of clamp down on some of our foreign policy initiatives, right? Swap lines or the availability for the Fed to give short-term lending to either developing nations or strong nations is entirely reliant on our monetary supply and what we have. And I think that CBDC can really change that, right? Because as we all know, the back door of the Fed is very much its own kind of drug deal. And while we may say that, okay, we're moving off of LIBOR to, the new US, interbank rate, I think that the actual change from T+2 to T0 or instantaneous payments and digital is pretty far off, into the future. I think it'll take another 30 years. But I think the biggest issue is that if the Fed loses their money and they're not able to track down who actually took it, it would screw with our entire, US domestic economy. So I think the better we get with investigating financial crime and their intersectionality with cybersecurity and cyber fraud, I think the quicker we will get away from fiat currency, which I personally would enjoy, because I can't remember the last time I had more than $30 of cash in my wallet.
No kidding. No kidding. Not to mention how dirty it is, but that's a topic for another discussion.
Yeah.
I could sit here and just absorb everything you have to say. Dawn seems to be very into this. That's not surprising to me. Is there anybody else that has any comments or questions while Melissa is here? I know you plan on staying the whole time, so if you think of any questions, you can pop that in the Q&A. And thank you so much for your knowledge and sharing that with us, Melissa. Every time I have a conversation with her, I just sit here and I nerd out because I approached most of my financial investigative background coming from the criminal enterprises that were leveraging and taking advantage of financial institutions, everything from the big banks to money transferring companies like Green Dot and Western Union and all of the things. So I come at it from a different angle, but with everything that she's saying, it's kind of like we need to tie the two together because they're more relevant. And then what I feel like the glue in between the two is for sure in the cyber realm. And I gave a presentation earlier today. I can't remember which one yet. They're all starting to blend together, where we did discuss a cyber investigation and how that eventually led to more of a security within the actual institution than it being an outsider threat. So it started as an outsider threat, but what it turned into was an insider threat and an overlook, and that absolutely happens. You have disgruntled employees that sometimes will take a small pay or turn a cheek and so on. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again, and we'll just jump into some of the technology and how it fits into this space. I will say that I'm going to, you look like you're being wind blown there, Melissa. It's a beautiful picture. So I want to talk about the architecture and when we're talking about essentially about any shop. Honestly, it could be a financial institution, it could be a law enforcement entity, it could be a commercial organization that has issues with supply chain management or brand protection, anything in between. So and a lot of organizations on the commercial space to deal with all of the above, they're dealing with financial aspects, they're dealing with cyber crime, they're dealing with brand protection, executive protection, and all of those things. So the stack that I'm going to put in front of you today can address all of those. So it's a shared asset, a shared investment, if you will, in that we're all dealing with these layers on the left-hand side, and some of them better than others. The first one that I'm going to discuss is the data source layer. There's an abundance of information out there. And I mean, let's just start with what we have internally, right? Looking at all of the data that we have access to internally within your organization is a plethora. And it's a combination. Some of it is in siloed databases, some of it is in Excel spreadsheets, and then you have the unstructured data that's living on files on shared servers all over the place. And that's just internal, but then we leverage external data and everything that we're bringing in. And then there's all of these now third-party vendors that try to make that external data a little bit more user-friendly, such as Cyari and Hyas and a lot of the other vendors that are escaping my head right now. But with that said, going door to door, as I often call data shopping, and trying to log in, query, research, download, and then consolidate all this information and get it into a place or to a point that you can actually conduct analysis, make sense of it, and further an investigation, if that's in your realm, is so time consuming. And often in some places and cases in the commercial side, it's just pushed to the side. I've done my due diligence. I've scraped the top layer, but that's as far as I'm going because I don't have the time or resources to dig any deeper. So out of that challenge, industry-wide, Blue Fusion was born, and we fit snugly in between that data source layer and your user interface layer, whatever that may be. So we are data source agnostic. We are also platform, intelligence platform, security platform, whatever platform you are already leveraging or want to leverage, agnostic. And our primary objective is to make a more efficient workflow by providing you a federated query that taps into those data sources. So we do not move, duplicate, or replicate any data. We build a connector directly to your data source. Everything is on your side of the firewall, on-prem. We have nothing to do with it after we build the connector and put it in place. We provide you a user interface that is very easily to build complex queries. And then again, you're simultaneously hitting that data, saving you a lot of time and effort. What you do with your results from there is can go a number of different ways. Again, as you see here, you could feed a user interface layer that might be a BI type of interface where you're just trying to look at things from a statistical perspective. It might be looking at it in a link analysis environment and furthering on an investigation. And then the last layer that we can help to provide if it's a requirement is a storage layer that's secure and collaborative. So once you've gone through these different data elements and combining different data sources to speak to a holistic view and picture, we need a place to be able to store that information because, at least in my background, in my line of work, historical information can help jumpstart an investigation or analysis where you're not having to recreate a lot of the efforts that were done previously. And that previous could have been last week, or that previous could have been 10 years ago. I'm very sure investigations that I worked on 10, 15 years ago, those individuals and things and stuff are still coming up in current investigations, and it's there for them to leverage. So all of these things we address, but again, our flagship solution is the Blue Fusion technology, and we aim to create a most efficient workflow. So I am going to deliver a live demonstration, and I hesitate just a little bit there because the environment that I was going to show is not working, but that's live technology and accessing virtual machines, and having my computer run for the last 7 hours nonstop for you. But I absolutely can show you the technology. The environment that I was going to show, we have connectors into Cyari and Hyas and Spy Cloud, leveraging deep dark web, and then institutional open source information seamlessly integrated. But so if everyone could put on their imagination hats with me and pretend that we are connected to those data sources, then we will get through this live demonstration, no problem, and you'll have a really good understanding on how you may be able to leverage internal and external data sources and get through that workflow most efficiently. So I'm going to be demonstrating leveraging the visual link analysis tool Analyst Notebook. As I mentioned, we are platform agnostic. So if you leverage something like Maltego, Tableau, Kibana, and there's like another handful out there, that's great. We can seamlessly integrate there. This is a technology that I've used throughout my career and have leveraged, and so I feel very confident in it. And I've also taken investigations well into the indictment phase through this process. So leveraging Blue Fusion, we query the data through two primary ways. First is the property search, second is the virtual query or visual query, excuse me. So as I mentioned, we build those connectors, we install them, we put them on your side of the firewall, and then everything is left for the user to have easy access to and control over. So my favorite way to query is leveraging the visual query, being that it's very visual in nature, hence the name, because it's very easy. It's essentially like taking out your coloring crayon and building out your question, drawing it out, and you can get very complex very easily. No need to understand how to write SQL code. No need to don your propeller hat or involve IT or any type of data scientist, although I very much well and respect all of them. I just know they have more important things to do than write me SQL queries. I can draw out my question. So essentially, I am now looking for an individual that's tied to an organization, and they're linked to a phone, and that phone's connected to another phone. Honestly, if you can dream up the question, you can draw it out here. If you wanted to go cyber realm, of course, we have IP addresses and whatnot. Now, all of these entities that you see at the top here would be customized based on your mission. So for some reason you had absolutely no desire or need to have, say, email, which I know is most likely false in this audience, then you wouldn't see it there. We keep out the noise. We keep it very mission centric on what data you're leveraging, and then even down into the property level of those entities. So within, say, a person record, right? Especially in the law enforcement realm, there is a plethora, I mean, a data sheet 3 pages long worth of attributes that you can define on a person. But what is actually imperative in the investigative or analysis process? So we ask you that, we drill down on that information so that you can focus your efforts there. Now, if I hit search, one of 3 things is typically going to happen. First and foremost, it's going to hit all of the data sources simultaneously, saving you time and effort, and you don't have to go data shopping, as I like to call it. But after that, 3 things is typically going to happen. 1, you're going to get results, be satisfied with those results, and you're going to carry on your workflow. That's the best case scenario. 2, you're going to get results, going to be dissatisfied with those results, but you have the full flexibility to come right back here, tweak your question, make it more vague, more specific, and then try again. Or 3, you're not going to get any results. And guess what? That happens. Sometimes the data is not there, or it's not there just yet. With all of those things in mind, Blue Fusion provides you the ability to save this query. And with that save comes the ability to share this query with my team. We all ask similar questions, or we want to put similar questions in play. So with that, why not hit the ground running? Furthermore, we can opt to have this query run reoccurring in the background. Essentially, you're hiring a virtual analyst to work for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at your discretion. You determine when this question will be asked next and at what interval you want it ran. You can have it go as often as every hour or as infrequent as every 24th week. Putting these in place and then determining who within the solution will be notified of the results. And you also have the option to send external notifications in case you're not in the solution, but you want to know immediately. Now, I know, and we are integrated with systems like SIMS, where they're pushing out alerts and allowing cyber-centric users to put in place and I'm losing all my words today, and to basically fix the problem. I'm not going to get all technical on you guys because I can't find my words, but anyway, to get in and to mitigate the issue. But with that said, SIM is focused on cyber and IP and traffic and all of the things that are in that realm. It doesn't take into consideration any of the other data points and sources. So earlier I discussed about how outside threat came from a SIM, and when we followed it and incorporated HR records, phone records, badge access, where employees are going in certain aspects of the building, phone calls between office desks, and putting all of those different components together, you were able to tell a story and see that, yes, it was an outside threat and there was malware and things, but what actually happened is there was an insider who was further enabling the data being stolen from the institution. So it's important to incorporate all of the different data points. So anyway, back to this, with this query, by default, it's going to hit all of the different data sources that you're connected to, but you do have the option to turn these on and off. So in this particular environment, I'm connected to deep and dark web, a case management system, a records management system, and then more law enforcement indices, access to DMV. This could very well be other financial useful vendors. Like I mentioned, we have a partnership and a connector into Sayari. They've been a wealth of information and a great consumer of that type of data. And then I have an intelligence repository, right? That's my collaborative environment that I'm pushing vetted data and intelligence and case information to, that I can leverage at a later point. So leveraging saved queries is as easy as picking it from a list. Let's see, where do I want to go with this since I'm not on my normal track of things? We'll just keep it simple. So this query is focused on a person. This could very easily be like a KYC moment where you're trying to understand. I've seen financial institutions use the investigative software, the solution as a whole, in so many different aspects. It's always very interesting to me. We've covered a couple of them, but one that was super innovative that I didn't ever think I would find the software leveraging was wealth management. There's an institution down in Texas. I'll let you try and guess where and who, but they were really focused on their portfolio and they wanted to understand social networks of their current clientele. So it was like a know your customer on steroids. They wanted to know their customer, but they also wanted to know their customers' network so that they could essentially recruit more customers that had millions and billions to put into their institution. And they leveraged this software to do that, because they could incorporate multiple data sources that would give them that type of information on their businesses, on their portfolios, on their networks, social media, things of that nature, and then pull it over all together and apply social network analysis and to the networks and go from there. So there's a plethora of different use cases, even within just one type of financial institution. And as I mentioned up front, the asset can be leveraged by multiple groups within the organization, then funds can also be shared and applied. So that's one realm. But okay, so back to the scenario. We're keeping it basic here, but looking for an individual, want to know we know maybe partial information. He has a phone and starts with 203, and show me any other person that is connected. So let's kind of tie this back into the use case. Maybe we're looking at a current client. We know his name. He's affiliated or has a business account, and we have only just a partial name of that information, and we want to know any other individuals that's affiliated with it. And we're tapping into the data sources that, again, we're already leveraging today, just in more of a tedious and manual process, and speeding that up. So hitting search this time, you'll see how the results are brought back. So on the left-hand side, you will see a synopsis. Did I hit cancel? Sorry. Let's try again. Continue. That's an open source record vendor. Hooster, it's just asking me if I want to go run out and run a live query against that vendor, and I'm opting not to. But anyway, on the left-hand side, I have a synopsis of the data that's brought back. I have my entities and relationship types as well as a quantity. And on the right-hand side, I get a preview of my information. Now I can filter down and say the individual, and maybe I'm interested in this person. All of the data you see here is a consolidated view. I hang on the word consolidated because on the surface, it looks that way, but if you look at the individual record, you'll see two tabs here at the top. That's representative of the individual data sources that this information came from. So if this record, Andrew Wells, was comprised of 15 different data sources, you would see 15 tabs across the top. That's important for a number of reasons, but primarily for you to just understand exactly what data is coming from where, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to be asked, where did you get this information? And now you can easily convey that, that data flow. And I mentioned when you got results and you were satisfied with them, you would probably just carry on with your workflow. Well, in my past life and in this environment, I want to see it visually. I'm a very visual person. I want to see the network laid out. And so I'm going to push this to my chart. And now I can see there's my person that I started with on the upper right. I have 2 other individuals that I'm now interested in because they're connected to my phone that starts with 203. And going into our scenario that I had planned to share, maybe this is a business asset that we're interested in seeing and growing the network, so that maybe we tap into it, or maybe we're doing our due diligence to understand who this individual is and do we want to do business with them? Are they being transparent and truthful of all the information that they're divulging to us? So from here, we can continue to leverage all of the data sources that we're connected to and grow and explore this network through our expand and filtered expand. Filter expand allows you to pick and choose what entities you want brought forth. So if I only want to focus on other individuals at this point, or I want to see assets that these individuals are tied to, or, you know, sky's the limit, whatever entities you want, then you can go through here, select the ones that you want, hit expand and bring them back. Or you can do a straight expand, which will bring back anything and everything, and you can go out a number of degrees of separation. It's a very easy way to very quickly build out a network so that you can conduct analysis rather than research, query, download, consolidate, and all of the process that goes with data chopping. So I'm going to go out 4 degrees of separation. Again, not tapping into my Hooster Live connection of open source records. And it's going to go across those 7 separate data sources, query them simultaneously, taking all relationships and non-obvious relationships into consideration, and then bring that back in a visual way and build out that network for me. And like I said, my computer is ready to quit on me. So this is taking a little bit longer than usual, but still, if you can imagine going door to door, 7 different data sources, signing in, querying, let's see, that was 3 people and a phone. We'll just stick with the people. Querying the 3 people, digging everything you can on them to understand them on a level that allows you to make an intelligent decision moving forward, whatever that may be, or to support an investigation or operation, then the average analyst has told me there's typically 10 to 15 data sources they're tapping into, and it takes on average about 5 minutes. And that's them knowing things quickly and not forgetting your password, but 5 minutes per data source. So you're looking at over an hour per piece of data. I have 3 individuals that I just pulled back. So you're looking at what, 3 hours worth of querying, researching, collecting, and consolidating information that I was able to do in under 30 seconds. So when I say that I define Blue Fusion as efficient, this is exactly what I mean. So now that I have this network built out, if it were me, I'm going to use some of the analysis capabilities that live within this environment, or any other analytical platforms environment to better understand this bit of information. But the other way to query Blue Fusion I want to discuss briefly is through our property search. So these are much more tailored queries where you're looking for specific information. Maybe it's an account number, a person, a business, what have you. These queries can also be saved, leveraged by the team, no matter where they're at, and set up on reoccurring queries. So a lot of times we may want to use the visual query or the property search when we're trying to monitor certain bank accounts or certain activity or a combination of activities. If this person badges in this area and between or before 8 a.m. and after 6 p.m. and conjunction with there's a cyber alert that is generated and they're signing into a PC that's not on their profile, alert me. So you can ask super crazy complex questions, again, very easily. That would probably take at least 5 pages of code to write, but I have that full flexibility to do so. So back to leveraging saved queries. Maybe I just want to run a quick query for a phone. I can plug my phone in there, hit search. These are typically things that I kind of already know to exist. And I just want to pull it out because really, guys, I'm onto a bigger, more spectacular capability that I want to show you. So I need 2 entities in order to be able to show you that. So I'm going to run another quick query on a vehicle plate and load that results onto my chart. And now I'm looking at 2 entities. So this touches on a huge pain point that I saw in my past career, but I also see industry-wide, use case-wide, and all over the world. And that is the time, not only that it takes to take all data into consideration when you're conducting analysis, but also when you're specifically looking for a piece of information that either confirms or denies a connection. Is this car and this phone connected? Are these 2 individuals connected? Is this business associated with this business by 4 degrees of separation or less? So those types of questions, being that we're connected to these various data sources and taking them all into consideration is as if we were to replicate all that data and put it into a big fat data lake, but not. I can run a path search against this data, essentially saying, you know, are these 2 entities connected? Is there a nexus? Determine how many degrees of separation I'm willing to tolerate. In this instance, 4. Hit continue, and it will go in, again, taking all of those data sources into consideration and find the path of least resistance. So now you see that path of least resistance. So if we were saying this phone is a business and this car is a business, and I want to know if there's an affiliation because maybe this business has been blacklisted, but this business we love and would really want to do business with and be brought on and learn that the individuals that are associated with these 2 businesses are connected through a third party, whatever that may be, that may alter our decision to do business with this first organization. So it's things like that that can be done in a matter of a few seconds versus hours, sometimes days, or even weeks that I would spend personally racking my brain going through multiple data sources trying to decipher whether or not there was a connection. Now, in today's age, especially with social media, these types of connections can be found quite quickly. And with that, Blue Fusion is seamlessly integrated and has connectors to a plethora of vendors that offer more rapid results in certain aspects of data. So everything from deep web, dark web, social media, business assets, open source vendors like TLO, LexisNexis Clear, credit unions, and things of that nature. We have the ability to, we have most likely partnered with the majority of them. We're bringing on partners more and more every day. And our goal is to have one of the most robust connector libraries imaginable. So on that note, I want to share with you our semi current connector library, because as I mentioned, this library really is growing day by day, and it's hard to keep up. Our development team does some amazing job. On average, it only takes us about 2 weeks to stand a connector up from scratch, and that's from the time you say, yes, I want this connector. Here is the documentation supporting everything about this data source that I want to connect to the point we implement it. And that's record speed. I don't know any other vendor that can build a connector that quickly. But again, where we stand apart is all of these connectors are feeding into Blue Fusion, which is that ability to federatedly query with no code involved. So this also shows you an array of the data types that we incorporate, everything from anonymous reporting alerts, case management, geospatial components, open source record vendors, social media, SIM alerts, telephone, you name it, we've probably done some type of business with it. But again, we welcome all new relationships and the ability to provide you with those data sources. So with that then concludes our demonstration today. Again, I apologize that I wasn't able to show a more centric demonstration. Unfortunately, my environment told me to go pound sand today, but hopefully you guys put on your imagination hats and were able to kind of walk down that realm with me. If you want to follow up with a chat right now, we actually have 2 breakout sessions that are available for you to join. I believe Dawn is going to drop those in the chat. If you want to talk anything around sales or training, you can join our success team breakout session, or if you have any technical questions or questions around grants, we do have a grant writer on staff who is prior law enforcement and lives and sleeps in grant programs. We offer his services free of charge. So if your organization is in need of trying to allocate resources and understand where they might be able to get funding, he's a great resource to leverage. And Melissa, my dear, thank you so much. I appreciate your support and knowledge and expertise. I definitely learned a lot today, and I hope our viewers appreciated your time as well.